Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who's been excited for the new Justice album for years. I'm going to be reviewing Hyperdrama, and if you've been watching this channel, you know that basically between 2004 2018, when I started this channel, I didn't pay any attention to new music. There were a couple of exceptions, and basically it was anything that had to do with Kanye West or Daft Punk. And so, as you may imagine, Justice kind of slipped in to my general music consumption of that time. You see behind me the poster that was given away at the Record Archive at the release of Woman in 2016, and I've really loved their music. But this new album, it's an interesting one, and it's a difficult one to talk about. So I'm going to be asking two very simple questions, which I hope to answer throughout the course of this review, analysis, whatever the hell it is I do. If this is your first time watching, I don't give scores. So I give it a purple out of 8. That's my score. But what I try to do is bring some kind of analysis and framing devices. And the first question is the question I've been asking since I first heard Cross. Hell, I think I was even on board. I think I heard the Simeon remix. Like, I think I was somehow that early to the Justice Party. The main question is, will they ever live? Will they ever be outside of the long, long, long shadow of Daft Punk? Okay? Can they, as a great French electronic duo who makes music with a lot of compressed sounds and makes a lot of disco, etc., can they ever be outside of that shadow? Now that Daft Punk doesn't exist, are they fully outside of it? And that's the first question, which I'll try to talk about. And then the second one is, hey, is this a good Justice album? It's their 4th album. Is it as good as the first 3? In the, 5 days I've been listening to this album, I've just been whipping back and forth on that. Yes, no, definitely, not at all. And so let's talk about those things. Now, first of all, let's talk about the Daft Punk shadow, because I think it's a fascinating thing. Because if you watch interviews with them, they're not deferential. They don't believe that they started in the same way or doing the same thing that Daft Punk does. And I believe that. I see the differences in their music, that Daft Punk is more about house music and Justice is more sort of about a rock and roll aesthetic. But the fact remains that it's impossible, at least for me. Now, if you're like a real Justice head and a real Justice fan, and you find this kind of discourse very aggravating, I want to give you my personal promise. If you leave a long, angry diatribe in the comments, I will pin it, okay? If you want to make an argument for why no one should ever compare Justice and Daft Punk, I will give you the complete time of day, because I want it to be true. But it's more complicated than I think just the simple comparison. Because, Coldplay has been in the shadow of Radiohead, right? Like, that's a fairly simple thing, sort of trying to do what they're doing and becoming popular and all that. There's a lot of bands that live in the shadow of other bands that aren't as good as Justice. I like to make sports analogies because I'm a simple person. If I make literary analogies, I don't think people are going to follow me. So, you've all heard of Michael Jordan, and you've probably all heard of Scottie Pippen. And the thing is that Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan were on the same team, the 90s Bulls, considered to be one of the best teams in the history of the NBA. And it's undoubtable that, Daft Punk is maybe the greatest band of the past 30 years. Right? I mean, there are other people in competition, but for my taste, I think they are the greatest. But I think Justice is too. I think Justice might actually be one of the best bands of the past 30 years. I really think so. If you take a list of the top, 50 basketball players of all time, Jordan is always number 1, maybe 2 or 3, behind Wilt Chamberlain, Marcus Smart, but basically he's always number 1, right? But beyond that, Pippen is top 20, top 30. He is still considered one of the greatest players of absolute all time. So when I'm talking about Justice being the Scottie Pippen of music, it's really not an insult. It's just more this bizarre fact of being in the shadow of this greatness. Maybe you're European. So Angel Di Maria, on the Argentinian soccer team is great. He's not Messi, but he's great. Maybe you're a French soccer fan. You know, Antoine Griezmann is one of the greatest players in world football right now. He really is, but he happens to play on the same team as Mbappe, so he's not going to get the same kind of credit. So I am calling Justice the Djorkaeff, the Angel Di Maria, the Scottie Pippen, the Antoine Griezmann of not just like French house, but like of these two absolutely amazing bands. Now, the reasons why they're compared, I touched on them before. They kind of go a little bit deeper, though, than just like they can sound similar. A lot of it, so I teach a class on French rock and hip-hop, and I focus a lot, especially on hip-hop music, and I do sort of one class about French dance music, electronic dance music. And what's interesting is French hip-hop, which is great, largely exists at the outskirts of society by the sort of underrepresented, whereas techno tends to come from the places of power. This is people of privilege. Famously, Daft Punk went to the same high school as Jacques Chirac, right? Lycée Carnot. It's also listed somewhere on the internet that Justice also went to that school. I don't think that's true. Please tell me if it is, if you're a Justice fan. But I mean, when you see their names, if you read the names of Daft Punk and you see the O Même Christo, and you read the names of Justice and you say De Rosnay, when you see the de in a name, that has an indicator. That is a communicator of class and privilege and of legitimate aristocracy. Like the aristocracy that they tried to guillotine out of existence, it didn't, and it still continues. So what's fascinating about a lot of these groups is, and the same thing applies to Air as well, that these young, white, privileged men formed these groups in the 90s and the 2000s, and they found this template of working together and being a duo, not just being one person, and create, like taking their privilege and their intelligence and their knowledge of art and finance and all that to create something wonderful. And just the fact that what they create can be similar, again, these compressed sounds, this desire to create some kind of intelligent dance music that's maybe not even for dancing, that's more for thinking, sort of robotic disco, human techno. Really, the more I think about it, the meditations on what is organic and what is electronic is at the heart of Justice, and certainly this album, and it's at the heart of Daft Punk. So that's perhaps their greatest similarity, and I'm not saying that that's because they're French. I'm a French professor. I'm not from France. I study French civilization. I don't think that the French are more inclined to study the difference between organic and electronic than the Americans or the Brits or the Serbs, right? It just happens to be that they are very good at it. But if we go deeper than that, as a Justice fan for all these years, there's like this similarity in output, you know? Homework, you know, Daft Punk's comes out, Homework in 97, 4 years later, Discovery 2001, 4 years later, Human After All, 5 years later, Tron Legacy, 3 years later, Random Access Memories. And then Justice, Cross, 4 years later, Audio Video Disco, 5 years later, Woman, 8 years later, Hyperdrama. So this sort of extension, this longer space in between them, both of these groups, despite the fact they work in electronic dance music, where often people just churn out album after album after album after album. You know, this is Deadmau5, Hamburglar Stories, Volume 2, Chapter 3, right? That kind of just keep on making stuff. They have this sense of perfection, this sense of creation. But it's also that there's like weird homologues, like pairings, where Justice's first album, Cross, shows, I mean, an amazing mastery of tone, of sampling, but that, along with Audio Video Disco, perhaps an even better album, their second album, with its more sort of cosmic overtones, it's like Cross is a perfect pairing with Homework, and then Audio Video Disco with its sort of larger themes is a perfect theme with Discovery. And then Woman, with its great recreation of disco, seems like a perfect response to Random Access Memories, which came out 3 years earlier. Whenever I talk about bands that are influenced by other bands, I do it for a reason. The reason is, what the hell is the point of starting a revolution if nobody follows you? What's the point? What's the point of being the Beatles if you can't have other people who try to make music that sounds as good as your music? So we have these sort of three pairs. Now, there's 2 albums by Daft Punk that don't have a twin with Justice. Obviously, Tron Legacy, one of my favorite Daft Punk albums. I'm just putting this out there. There's going to be a new Tron movie. Tron Legacy is maybe the best science fiction movie of the 21st century. It is a ridiculously good movie. Okay, it's not as good as Revenge of the Sith, but the Attack of the Clones, whatever. George Lucas still has it on there. But beyond that, it's one of the best movies of this century. And Daft Punk does the soundtrack. So how is it that Justice does not do that soundtrack? Can we make that happen? I saw somewhere on some post someone saying, oh, I hope Trent Reznor does it. No. How awesome would it be to have like this? Anyways, so there's that. But what's the main thing that Daft Punk never had, that Justice never had, that Daft Punk had? Human After All. Human After All, that I remember so specifically. The first time I listened to Human After All, I had an iPod, and I downloaded the album on iTunes, and I put it on my iPod, and I bicycled to grad school. I was in family student housing, and I went up this little hill, and a bee stung me right there. I remember listening to it the very first time, trying to figure out what it was. I remember over the next couple weeks, I wasn't a part of a music discourse. I didn't have a channel. I didn't have friends who cared about Daft Punk. I didn't have anybody. I didn't have anything. I had myself and my headphones. And I said, it's all right. Some of it's pretty good, but most of it is not great for it's not great for a Daft Punk album. Is it a great album? Absolutely. It is a spectacular album, but not up to their own standards. Which brings me to a review of Hyperdrama by Justice. Did I just say Hyperdrama? I'm a real Bostonian. Do we think that this is their Human After All? And I mean that in 2 senses, right? One, that it is not the sum, that it is not up to their extremely high standard, despite its excellence. When I'm talking about Human After All, I know Steam Machine. I know that song, and I know it rules, and I know Technologic, and I know Robot Rock, and I'm everything. It's a great album. It's awesome. Any other band, that's a top flight album. But for a Daft Punk album, it's a band. Okay? So it's possible that this album, this 4th Justice album, is their weakest in that sense. But I'd like to go deeper and say that this album is Human After All because that should have been the title of the record. It shouldn't have been Hyperdrama. This album feels like it is primarily about organic and electric. Between, even the cover with the cross and like the 3D of the chest and the veins and the vascular system and the ribs and the bones, it's like they're communicating to us. And if you hear them talk about it, they talk about certain songs about how, and once you start paying attention to it, you start going crazy because you're listening to this music and you're like, wait, what happened? That was a drum machine. Now it's a real drum set. Wait, what happened? Now it's a drum machine again. Was it ever a real drum? Is that a bass or is that a bass? What's happening here? This album is probably, and this goes for a lot of things that I really love, is quite possibly too smooth. It could be such an interesting analysis of artistic experiment in organic and electronic sounds. The kind of experiment that we need more now than we did in whenever, 2006. When did Human After All come out? I just said 2005, right? Yeah. Like, we need this more now, especially as the line between computer-generated and human-generated gets blurred. As we listen to this album, you have to be paying absolute attention with headphones on to figure out when one thing goes to another. The sum effect is that it sounds unlike anything I've ever heard before. So I'm sitting here going, yes, I don't think this is the best work. You know, it sounds like nothing I've ever heard before. Of course, they're not the first electronic dance band or whatever to try to go between these different kinds of instruments. Daft Punk did it themselves. But they do it so smoothly on here that it could actually be to a fault, to the point where what they're doing is so great and so interesting that we're like, we don't even notice it. Do you get what I'm saying? Which goes back to the second question. Is this album as good as the rest of the Justice albums? Yes. Yes. This album's amazing. It's amazing. But like many great albums, it really takes a little while to get into. I wasn't sold on Woman when it first came out. I was like, I don't know, it's kind of Daft Punk light. They're going to keep doing this. And then the more you listen to it, the more, same thing with audio, video, disco, right? I listen to that. I'm like, oh, that's fine. It's not as good as Cross, you know. And then the more you listen to it, and the more you listen to it, it has that depth to it. But you need to dedicate and donate your time to this level of art. Which goes back to the first question. Will they ever be out of Daft Punk's shadow? They actually never belonged there in the first place. It's just it's some kind of weird coincidence. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know. It's a very confusing thing because on such a surface level, they're so similar. But on a deeper level, it is a sincere insult to both groups to group them together. But it requires so much, like, what do you kids on the internet say? Big brain thinking to keep them separate. But then once you do, you have this beautiful moment. I'd like to shout out another bigger YouTuber. Hey, I'd like to shout out two. One is called the WONKY Angle. He does a lot of really good electronic music stuff. I tried to get him to come on here and talk, but he doesn't check his Instagram pages much. But he does a lot of good work on electronic dance music. It's not my field of specialty, so I suggest you check him in general. And then Digging the Greats has a video they just put out about the first album by Justice. And he describes Justice's sampling techniques in a way... It's hard when you're a music YouTuber because you love other music YouTubers and you're also always in competition with them, right? It's stupid, but we're always in competition. And it's just the kind of video you just see it and you're just like, damn, I'll never do something that good. It's such a good video. Really, seriously, check it out. I'll include a link in the description. But he describes how they do samples. And what I think is interesting is that even now, from Cross to now, to Hyperdrama, to now, they're still doing the same basic techniques. So the first style is the microsample. And that's where they're able to take like one little sound and enter it into a sampler or enter it into a program and make that the sound that they're going to use. So it's like not even sampling a beat. It might be just sampling a single like, right? The second kind of sample is the full sample, where you actually take something and you pay the full royalties and you do the whole thing and you can clear it. It's a sample just like a hip-hop sample. And then the other one, the final one, is the in the style of, where they don't sample something, but they're intentionally creating something in the style of another artist. And that might be one of their greatest skills, and we'll get into it while we listen to this album. Is there like a weird reflection of the back of my head on the Justice thing? I'm seeing it, it's distracting me. I do want to make one last Daft Punk comparison here. Again, just finding the parallels between the albums. It does perhaps feel that this is their attempt to do what Daft Punk did with Random Access Memories in terms of collaborators, of bringing people on that make you want to go find their music, and some of them you know and some of you don't, and just kind of go deep into it because the level of collaboration on here is just outstanding. If you like this video so far, smash the like button, subscribe. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe you're so mad that I've been bringing up Daft Punk this whole time. You can do a little thing here. In the comments, if you type in AVAA, that stands for awful video as always. But I will give it a heart, because it also means awesome video as always. So if you put that anywhere in your comment, in caps, I will give that a heart. You can do the bell thing, join my Patreon, like Zach, who gets a shout out on this video, because I asked if he wanted one, and he got one. The final thing before I give you my stamp is I want to tell you a story about meeting Justice. It's not me, it's my buddy Dave. And he went to a Treasure Island in 2008, a concert in San Francisco. And he was in a backstage tent, and he sees these guys smoking. And so he goes up and bums a cigarette and talks to them for 5 minutes. And then later he realized that that was Justice. And he said they were very nice guys. He's just talking to them about France. So there you go. Justice, they sometimes come across as sort of aloof, like you might think maybe they're kind of pretentious, mean guys. Apparently they're very nice. And they gave my buddy Dave a cigarette. Trying to kill him? All right, I'm going to give you an example song off this album. This might not be the one you expect if you know the album, but to me, you can see everything about answering that second question. Is this album a weak Justice album? You can tell the answer is no, with a lot of attention to the song Dear Alan. Okay, obviously it's about the character Alan from Barbie. I got one joke per video. That's my joke. It's about some other producer, Alan Bartos. This is what I'm talking about. So much of what I do on this channel is just getting in front of the camera and saying, don't be spoiled. Don't take things for granted. You have to take a song like this and understand that you are not eating a Twinkie. You are eating the finest French pastry, okay? You are trying to find the layers, the delicacy, the subtlety. The little flourish from the last song opens it up because most of the album's connected. Almost a sort of like, almost like a Europa Endlos, sort of trans-Europa Express, Kraftwerky style keyboard thing. And then these gentle pluck sounds get louder and louder with this flange sound. All this atmosphere. At a certain point, it seems like it might be polyrhythmic, which means two rhythms happening at once. So much atmosphere. And then there's this little tiny click sound. The sound's going to become the snare, but when you first hear it, it sounds like shit. It sounds like this. It's like that. That's your snare, but as time goes on, and I don't know how they do it. Maybe this is what took them 8 years. Maybe that's what took them the entire Biden and Trump administration to come out with albums. This album, by the way, kind of ruined because it was like a week after Trump was elected. Woo! Party! Disco party! But this little ticky-ticky sound gets louder and more real and less fake as it goes on. And this is why I'm telling you, you have to listen to this album you have to listen to this album with a microscope. Man, I sound like a stoner. You have to listen to this album with a microscope so you can really see everything, man, because the level of perfection, it is just so gorgeous how the snare just gets more and more real. And then, what may be the secret to all the what we call French touch music. Oh, it's the phaser effects. Oh, it's the compress. Oh, it's the house. Oh, it's this. It's the bass, dumbass. It's the bass. Not dumbass, because I'm overgeneralizing. Sometimes it's the bass. Quite often it's the bass. When we think about like what makes great French touch music, so often, I mean, it's obviously Air is the easiest example, but with the rest of them as well, it is just this great little jam line. And then these layers and layers of the chorus and the cool little drum elements. And is there maybe some guitar in the background? I don't know. You have to listen with headphones. Just this bass and this drum machine. And there's a little break. And in this break, it sounds like what the past thought the future would sound like. I'm talking like commercials in the 80s for things like trucking schools and technical colleges would have these outrageous automated synthesizer sounds like ITT, Technical Institute, and it's this kind of weird little break that makes it sound weird and inauthentic, and then it goes back to the original groove, but then there's this little layer of like phasery compressed sounds added. Now the drums become more intense, but the bass is still leading everything. This is like 2 minutes in, and then the drums kind of get funkier, and then these synths come in from behind, and it's a real drum. It's a real drum set. When did they sneak the drummer in? You know? When did they sneak the drummer in? One of my favorite scenes in movie history is where the drummer for the Blues Brothers looks at the Blues Brothers as they're sneaking behind. And he gives just like a little head shake. Like, this is the opposite. This is the drummer sneaking in and just starting to play. And that's what I'm saying. This is why I'm saying, like, whatever they're doing artistically, it might be too subtle for us. We might not be big-brained enough to understand how great this album is. And now I think it's a different, now I'm going crazy. Now I'm seeing things. I'm listening with a microscope and I'm seeing that this is a different bass. This is like a little bit of a tinnier, a little bit more bass. Gaspard, can you tell me? Can you tell me if this is a different bass? Because I feel like it is. Is that a clap? Are we doing some disco claps here on these drums too? But not on the 1, not on the 4, like on the just every once in a while. And these weird ominous sounds come in, and then at 2 minutes and 40 seconds, it cuts out. All of this I've described to you is just 2 minutes and 40 seconds worth of song. Just the synths are being played here, but just these synths with that kind of function where you press one button on a synthesizer and it plays a whole chord, that kind of weird artificial sound, a different rhythm, a different style. Hey, where's the bass player? There's no bass anymore. The tinny drum machine comes back, and then it comes back, but it's just following, the bass comes back, but it's not the original bass groove. The bass comes back and he's just playing the root notes of whatever the synthesizers are playing. These really weird rhythmic pulse, just very simple melody. And it totally goes out. And then the ITT, Technical Institute stuff, comes back. And it gets faster and faster and faster and faster until it becomes complete and total freak out. And at that moment, you've lost everything. It's gone. You filed for bankruptcy. Your wife left. Your dog, John Wick, killed your dog. You just have absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I didn't see John Wick. That's what happens, right? You're just sitting there and boom, 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 boom. And the bass comes back and the groove comes back. Now, these little kind of loud sounds that came from that little freak out. Your wife comes back. Your dog arises from the grave and eats John Wick's face off. Everybody's happy. You're back out of bankruptcy. Now you run for president and you win. It's awesome. Maybe even some little like disco hits, little disco like sounds in the background. This great little jam takes you out. So that's the first time I listened to this album. I was like, I don't think this is it. I don't think they did it. I'm a little bit upset. I don't think that Justice is as good as they used to be anymore. I think they are, but I think they're a little bit more subtle. And should we not wish that on our great artists? Is it fair? Now that Daft Punk is no more, can we just finally give Justice their full credit that they deserve? All right, I'm going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker because I could, if I wished, go through that much. I could spend that much time describing every single song. But it opens up with Neverender with Tame Impala. So, hey, oh, that's, what? With Tame Impala? All right. Oh, I get it. You're doing the random access memories thing where you're working with the best artists. Awesome. But it's great. This is not as good as Justice and Tame Impala, okay? It's as good as Justice or Tame Impala, but it's not the sum of its parts. It's like the one of its parts, but still, it's just great. His voice is really nice, very cool, compressed French touchy bass synths. They do this thing on the album where they just cut out. The image that I have is if you're a little kid and you're playing with the knobs on a if you're a kid and you have like a hi-fi or a car radio, you can't really do this with modern technology. But anything with knobs, you just like play with it. Turn the bass all the way, turn the bass all the way down. Go hard left, go hard right, on the balance. But they just like cut out all the time, just like fully on the sound. And I think I sort of hate it. Like, the back half of the album doesn't work as well for me as the first half. I think that's why, but it's an interesting idea. It's not like it's a bad idea, but I don't think I really enjoy the sound. And then just, Kevin Parker's voice is just really ethereal all the way through. And it's almost like cool little ride bell, like harder, faster style to a certain point. Just remarkable transitions between these different parts. Too smooth. Little sweet outro. What is this album about? I can't tell. Okay, Human After All by Daft Punk. Why do I keep picking on them? Like, the main weakness of it is just like they were always like ahead of the curve, and just like having an album about like television, man. Television is ruling the nation. It just felt, I don't know. So like the general themes of that album weren't that interesting. But here, I remember The Hardest Times, I Don't Forget, Never Ender. It feels like it's sort of in the vein of Audio Video Disco, their second album, like a song like On and On. Just making music that have lyrics, but that are essentially instrumental lyrics, like lyrics that serve the groove. Then we get to the next song, Generator. What is this song? What are they doing here? Why is this song here? I have an answer for you. That's not a rhetorical question. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Rhetoric is a tricky thing. They're showing you, we know what the hell a Justice song is. You want us to make a Justice song? 1 second. Let me just get some pneumatic style sounds here, some compressed, funky drums, a song that makes you go, was this an outtake from Cross? These drums keep changing underneath, these little breaks for the bass. Yeah, is this kind of like Stress? It is. Is it kind of like Genesis? Yeah. And then this cool, like, stressful, flangey sound and backwards and forwards, all these little tiny breaks that goes into this groove, and then just these disco strings, and the bass is just working stupid hard, and the double hi-hat and the clapping and the drums, and there's just so many cool parts, so many cool parts happening all over the place all the time. There's even no drums for a little bit, and then it comes back, and there's these killer, like almost offbeat accents with this weird percussion sound that I don't know what it is. There might be a didgeridoo. Now listen, I'm not just saying that because they're working with Kevin Parker. I'm not going to be some guys like, oh, Australians, I'll carry around didgeridoos. But I don't know what these sounds are. But this whole song, to me, is just a way of telling their fans, it's okay. If you need us to dip into our Justice bag, we can give you a Justice song like that. Just, there you go. But instead, we need to set you up for the saxophone songs. Next track is After Image, which is almost like a combo of the first two songs. You know, the first song, it's a very kind of vibey album. And, you know, part of what is so enjoyable about Justice is if you like music that just makes you want to freak out, they're just make great music like that because they're trying to be like, you know, Black Sabbath meets house music, all that kind of stuff, you know. But this is, you know, this like sounds almost like a house vocalist, Rimon, who's from Eritrea, which is interestingly enough. Nice kind of 4 on the floor, you know, boom, 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 with the snare on the 3, boom, boom, ba, boom, 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 ba. Just very simple groove. Why don't things feel the same? Time painted all our pages. It's just a nice vibe. It's not raging here. It's just a nice vibe, which leads perfectly into the next song, One Night, All Night, again with Tame Impala. Nice sort of, instead of a boom, boom, ba, boom, we got sort of a boots and cats, but it's very slow. This cool kind of bum-ba-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum on the bass happens here. And then just, what I love is the way they use Parker's, they make it clear that Tame Impala's voice works perfectly with Justice's style because he has that feeling of like all of his vocals many of his vocals feel like he's just arriving someplace and it has that feeling. He sort of flanges his way out of nothingness. They say in an interview I read, the song oscillates between pure electronic music and pure disco, but you never really get the two at the same time. And if you want a perfect example, that skip to 3 minutes and 50 seconds of this song. I mentioned George Lucas and Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith. Part of what makes George Lucas such a great filmmaker, or an interesting filmmaker at least, is when he starts a movie, he starts it on one planet, especially the most recent movies, episodes 1, 2, and 3. And then, like, the movie ends on some other planet, and, like, you have to, like, figure out the trajectory of how you got there, and you just go through so many different places, and, like, was there a water planet at some point in there? And was I fighting big bugs? Am I on a city planet? Like, just that kind of sense of movement. The end of this, like, this disco bit here, it's just completely just organic disco. And then we get to these lyrics. Something's happening, okay? I do not study gender. That is not one of my areas of specialty, okay? Much like techno, it's not one of my areas of specialty. I have taught a class on French female filmmakers and directors, you know, Catherine Breillat and Agnès Varda and Hélène Sixou and Simone de Beauvoir and theory and all that. So I've done a little bit of it. But when it comes to gender stuff, that's not always the same as, feminism, feminist theory. St. Vincent, Beyonce, and Taylor Swift all have lyrics in their wildly popular albums from the past year where they talk about taking on a male role in a relationship. Especially Beyonce. She does it tons. I've not seen a male singer do the opposite, but that's what this is. I can be your woman, because if that's the only answer, then we could be together, because I want to feel the pressure, and I can be your woman. There's a couple of very kinky ways of reading these lyrics, which I'm not going to explain to you. I think if you know, you know, but I'm not sure I know. So if I know, you know, but you know what I mean. A rock star who presents as very male, as far as I know, Tame Impala doesn't, Kevin Parker does not express himself as anything other than the gender assigned at birth. So this is a very interesting, and I think what's happening is that this is a downhill result of the fact that now that we acknowledge the existence of people whose existence we used to deny, right? Now that they have a place in our society after we prevented them from being in our society for no good reason. Lots of bad reasons, but no good reasons. Perhaps we're seeing popular culture reflect this with more men and women who aren't saying, I am not the gender I was born as, but are playing with it. And I think as time goes on, the more that, God willing, or whatever is better than God, the thing better than God willing, as trans rights become the law of the world, maybe we'll see a lot more of this. I don't know. Just, again, this is that song where you just get lost between organic, electronic. The drums have this, stuttered feel, so when you're playing drums, you can play ahead of the beat or you can play behind the beat, So if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can be on the, if we say on the 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can be a little bit early on it, and that creates kind of like a stressful feeling, you can be on the 3, but just behind it. But if you want to be a cool guy, like a John Bonham guy, then you can hit at the end of the 3. So that it's just before the 4, so it has that kind of whoa feeling. They do tons of that. It's just being on the back of the beat. But I wanted to show you that I could play drums on my pants. Then we get to The Stamp, Dear Alan. Then we get to Incognito. So I watched the Zane Lowe interview. It was fine. It was not that revelatory. But I do like that Zane Lowe talked about how this song made him burst into tears. I believe it. This is another one of the songs you just have to pay more attention to it. Because it starts off and it sounds almost, as Zane Lowe says, like yacht rocky. And then it just comes in this great Justice style vocalization, super cut up sound. It sounds like it's those little micro samples. And it actually sounds, I thought it the first time I listened to it, I thought it was like a reinterpretation of the Imperial March from Star Wars, but the disco version done by Miko. True story, the best-selling instrumental album of all time is the disco Star Wars album by Miko. Other true story, Miko is the guy who played trombone on I'm Coming Out by Diana Ross. Other true story, I interviewed Miko once, very interesting guy. Finally, that's what I thought this was. I thought this was because it has that kind of feeling. It reminds you a lot of the Imperial March, but it's not. It's not at all. It's sampling someone named Clay Pedri and the song New Dream. And this is why I like it as having this kind of random access memory style feel, because now, the same way that when random access memories came out, I was like, who the hell is Giorgio Moroder? Who is Giorgio Moroder? What is that? And then I discovered Donna Summer, and I discovered all the great music that he did. I discovered the soundtrack to American Gigolo. Really good soundtrack, actually. I discovered all the things that Giorgio Moroder did in a similar way. I discovered all sorts of stuff that they did that. And in a way, Justice is doing that, because you just go and find this song, and it's like they do all 3 things that Digging the Greats did. Right? Digging the Greats, it has the micro samples with the spirit kind of sound. It also has a full sample of the song, plus it's also in the vein of, in the style of all of this. And it just sounds so great. And just built all these different parts, these weird echoey sounds. It's just a great song. And the most interesting thing from the Zane Lowe interview is that they said they didn't sample a digital version. They sampled the YouTube video of the song, which is how they discovered the song. They, unlike Random Access Memories, this isn't like, forever we have love Daniel Pedri, is a great Italio musician who does great things, that I love. No, they were just like goofing around on YouTube and like, zut alors, you know, let's check it out. It's cool. They introduce the themes of Mannequin Love and then play Mannequin Love straight from the last one. These great weird lyrics. So you know, mannequin in English means like the you know, the thing, like the body that you put clothes on. It's how you say model in French. Like if you say I'm a male model, je suis mannequin. So I don't know if that's on purpose here. They really use their singers really well on this album, because the way that you know, we're right above heaven, this must be more than Mannequin Love, just with these great layers. Again, these drummers are changed, like the drumming changes slightly, and it has that kind of Giorgio Moroder feeling at times. At a certain point, I imagine there could be so good in the back here. And this vocalist, I guess these two brothers from Belgium, I don't know who the Flints are, but this is that other thing, the other thing that great albums do is when people are on them, like, I'm going to keep an eye out for the Flints. The next time they do something, I'm going to hopefully review it. Moonlight Rendezvous. What is this? It's like Kenny G saxophone? I had a funny French snob moment. So I was watching the interview, and I think it was Gaspard was talking about this song. He said, detective jazz. That's what they call this. So they're trying to make music that sounds like the jazz that plays for a detective. And he describes like being a detective, looking out the window and being world weary and having a cigarette, and all you see is like these androids in this futuristic scene. And he said, it's a movie, and we all know what movie I'm talking about. And then Zane Lowe was like, yes, we all know what movie we're talking about. And so I'm sitting there, and being the snob that I am, I'm thinking, oh, they're thinking about Alphaville, Jean-Luc Godard's great science fiction movie that's not a science fiction movie, that's a detective movie that's not a detective movie, that's an action movie that's not an action movie. Occupé. Just one of the great movies. Just awesome. One of my just absolute bonkers, crazy-ass, non-science fiction movie. And then I was disappointed because Zane was like, of course, everyone knows we're talking about Blade Runner. I'm like, God damn it, Blade Runner. Do we need another Blade Runner song? Can we get some Alphaville music out here? And I'm not counting the 80s band called Alphaville. Anyways, one thing I like about this, though, is that it's a nice downbeat moment in the album. But there's this low sub bass that's so low, it made me want to puke. Like, it was this like soft rock feeling, but I'm like, whoa, jeez. And there's even some nice falling apart sounds. And then we get to the back half of the album with explorer, which is an ER verb in French. Maybe they mean explorer, I don't know. With Connor Moccasin, very chill, these nice bubbling up synths. Okay. Sorry, I have a bunch of stuff that I put up here. Napoleon, get the hell out of here. You have nothing to do with this video. I put Napoleon up there for my Alchemist video. We got Bach up there because we got some awesome Baroque music here. We got, as Digging Up the Greats points out, some nice counterpoint. They use counterpoint super well. This is sort of like, remember at the end of Stress on Cross, that little like nice gentle moment? This is like that, but just extended out into a whole song. More of these unsettling breaks with the knobs, the cutting out, I don't know. Maybe it's just a new technique that they have. At times, because it's playing with organic electronic sounds, the keyboard reminds me of the sounds if you ever play an organ, like Bach played. Bach didn't play pianos, he played organs. Organs are complex because they are on or off, right? You can't play. The reason they call pianos pianos is because piano means soft, and you can play a piano softly. Before the piano, you could not play keyboard instruments except either it's making sound or it's not. So they have these things that allow how loud it's going to be, which are called stops, which are which prevent air from going through the pipe and the organ. So the sound of kind of turning on, that's pulling out a stop. That's why the expression pulling out all the stops exists, because if you have an organ and you play it and you press down on it, right? Doesn't matter how hard you press down on it, if not all the stops are out, it'll make a little tiny sound. Bam. But you pull out all the stops, you're in Hans Zimmer town, baby. Bam! It's all the way out there. This sounds like someone pulling out the stops. And maybe that's the idea of the knobs. Maybe they're playing around with like the idea of like, as opposed to a knob, someone putting in the stops on an organ. I don't know. When did the drums come in? God damn it. When did this drummer get in here? How the hell? There was a dude back there, and he was sitting there, and he was like... And then I turn around, I'm looking over here, I'm thinking about organs, and all of a sudden... How are you doing this? I don't know. It's awesome. This might be the steam machine of this album. Step out through the back door. Nothing in plain blue sand in sight. Flat, nasty. What's that in the distance? Looking lonesome on the horizon. Walk closer to get a better look. It's tall, 10 stories tall. Some sort of a dog thing standing on all fours. I don't know what this is about, but I like it. And then this guy who's saying these things in an accent that sometimes seems American, sometimes seems like it's... Sometimes it sounds like an English accent. Sometimes it sounds like a cowboy accent. He's from New Zealand, so... Chops, bro. And then he starts singing. And this is one of those points on the album where I'm going to buy the album. I'm going to go to Record Archive in Rochester, New York. Even though, I got to be honest, they're not as good at giving promotional posters. I'm still bitter. I bought the damn Andrew Bird album. They had the posters, but they wouldn't give me one. It's okay. The amount of free advertisements I do for Record Archive in Rochester, New York, it's okay. Hey, they gave me that one, which is cool. But I imagine that this is the kind of album that there's certain like things that you come back to, like little moments that you just love, that you just can't believe how good it is. Just little things. I imagine the way that this person starts singing, that, what's the name again? Conan Moccasin starts singing, and just this weird voice. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. And it even gets a little bit vocodery at a certain point. There's like, it's like one... half bar, it's like one word they put a vocoder sound on, and it's bizarre because it's so much the Daft Punk trademark that I just hear it. It's like around the world, like one more, not together. You just hear it and you're already there. This album is amazing. Too subtle for you. Ends with these many lines, wish it would never end. Those are some notes that I took yesterday, and it stays true. Next track called Muscle Memory, probably my least favorite song on the album, kind of electronic farting, distortion, four on the floor stuff. Other layers make it nice. It gets almost kind of like Baba O'Reilly-ish at a certain point, and then it slows down. And then it has a sort of like, I've been talking about the Chicago Bulls of the 1990s, and they have a very famous opening song. Ladies and gentlemen, from North Carolina, right? The opening song for the Bulls, that's actually an Alan Parsons song. That's what this reminds me of. And then they just keep doing that stop thing. And then some harps come on here, and then it leads to the next song, Harpy Dream, where the harp sounds become electronic and become super duper 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 fast. Seems to be setting up for the next song, Saturnine. Saturnine is a adjective that defines people who are kind of like sad and slow and sullen. It's actually a way of insulting the god of agriculture, Saturn. Gloomy. The song's not gloomy, so I don't know. But a great pocket, nice pocket groove, some slap bass. Again, the drums are a little bit behind. The singer here does remind me a little bit of Pharrell off of Random Access Memories. But I do love this little bell. There's like a little... I forgot that I had this. Oh my God. I can't believe I get to use this. In my French classes, whenever I speak English, because I try to teach exclusively in French, if I ever speak in English, I'll bring the bell. And I'll hit that. That's too loud. I apologize. So they use a bell like that. I'll put that next to Bach here in front of Serge. And more just beautiful singing. I don't quite get what they're singing about. Only the sun could phase me out. I'm still dancing in the flames. I don't think it's super important. It's just, it gets fully organic again at the end with this funk bass and these orchestra hits, these very sharp drums. So many things happen until there's an outro with the bell, which also slightly reminds me of maybe some kind of Tibetan prayer bell, but I don't think it is. And then the album ends with a song called Fiend. I don't know why they chose to end the album with Fiend. Okay, I get 2 jokes this video. That's my other joke. It's called The End. The album begins with a song that's called Never End, right? Is that, it's called Never Ending, right? Is the first track called Never End? Am I wrong on this? Am I just doing, yeah, Never Ender. So maybe we're really in the audio video disco era here, because like the On, and that album had a lot about sort of themes of eternity and repeating, and if I do that, it really messes up the light on my camera. Check that out, huh? What the hell? Damn, camera. Start doing the freak. I said, damn, start doing the freak. So it's nice, though. It's nice because it makes a statement for an album that this is going to be an album. So we're going to end with a song called The End. And it starts off fight. Total Mortal Kombat style beginning. And then it keeps that super hype kind of like punchy keyboard stuff to get you psyched. But then the drums come in halftime behind it. And again, the snares at the very end of the beat. And then the hi-hat gets a little bit doubled. So that you think it's going to be a song. And the drums come in and it's like, ka-doom, ish, ka-doom, ish. Beautiful. And Thundercat starts singing. For an album that has so much great bass, to have Thundercat as a singer is quite funny. A great producer, a great Black American producer singing wonderful falsetto music on your disco and house album. I'm not saying it's a lot like Random Access Memories and that this is like their Pharrell, but it kind of is, but that's okay. I do like the themes here. He's talking about things being the end and it being okay, the way he just harmonizes with himself. He's a really, really good singer. I didn't know how good of a singer he was. And even the most Justice-y sounds underneath. It's kind of like a keyboard sound, a kind of a burpy, gurgly sound, which Daft Punk also uses, but I associate more with Justice. That's here too. And the song ends like more times than Return of the King. It's like it ends and they come back and a cool synth melody and they take us out and the voice comes back. This is the end. And I remember this feeling. Now I can breathe easy. No need to feel sorry. We should move up. We should move on because there's no coming back. About the sort of freedom of ending. You know, we always think about ending as being a terrible thing, but there's kind of a freedom to it. You know, don't mourn death. Best song sung by a Star Wars actor. And then it kind of ends with this little jam that just reminds you of the instrumental strength of this whole album. And it is just such joy. So these are my Patreons. They give me money so I can buy music. And I gotta tell you, between this and St. Vincent, it has been a really good week for music. Let's just celebrate it. So once again, I'm gonna answer the questions. Will they ever be out of the shadow of Daft Punk? No, but I don't think they deserve to be there. Okay? The same way Scottie Pippen will never be out of Michael Jordan's shadow, but he should be. And is this a bad Justice album? No, it's just a very subtle one. All right. Until then, I'm going to screw up my camera one more time. Wait. How does it? Oh, because it pulls focus from there. I have to be careful. This is a great power. All right. Until next time, there's the camera.